The biggest, the highest stakes game between the Wisconsin Badgers men's basketball team and the Marquette University Golden Eagles in well over a decade, and maybe ever, will take place on Saturday inside Fiserv Forum. It's not just me. We have an excellent guest here to break it down with you today here on the Sconnie Six Pack. Good morning, and thank you for enjoying it with the Six Pack. The Sconnie Six Pack, the only podcast talking all things Wisconsin sports at just 6 days a week. I'm your host, Kedrick Stumbris. I cover the Wisconsin Badgers for Athlon Sports. You can find me on the website formerly known as Twitter at Kedrick Stumbris, and follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and beyond. Like I mentioned, probably the biggest game in this rivalry, if you want to call it that, since 2011. In that year, that was the last time Wisconsin and Marquette played each as ranked opponents. That was an undefeated Marquette, 16th ranked team in the country. They won in Madison. They played number 9 Wisconsin, which entered that week unbeaten at 6-0, but lost to North Carolina, which had previously been the number 1 team in the country, I believe, earlier that week. It matches up pretty similar to how this week has put itself together. Marquette entered this week 5th in the AP poll, just lost to number 6 Iowa State. Iowa State, which only lost to Auburn in Maui. Maybe Iowa State has the second best resume in the country, something like that. Marquette, 10th at KenPom, 14th at Bart Torvik, and 14th at Evan Mia. Wisconsin enters the week at 11 in the AP poll, number 11 at number 5 in Marquette. But Wisconsin, of course, lost to Michigan earlier this week. A team that I said when we talked to Kellen Voss of Maize and Brew earlier this week, I really did think was underrated. It's probably not a performance Wisconsin's going to look at fondly this past week at the Kohl Center, but that's a Michigan team that was 4th out from the top 25 in this week's poll, but probably deserved to be better. That Michigan team is up to 17th at KenPom. And now Michigan, Wisconsin, moving past the Wolverines. Wisconsin 35th at KenPom and Evan Mia, 39th at Bart Torvik. KenPom projects a 79-71 victory for the Marquette Golden Eagles. Torvik has Marquette scoring just 1 point fewer at 78-71. As I am recording this for posterity's sake here at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday. Maybe those numbers wiggle a little bit over the next couple of days. Should be an excellent matchup. Like I said, biggest game since 2011. At least there's not a lot of history of these two teams being good at the same time. Marquette dominated in the 70s when they were a national force, and Wisconsin was not anything close to that. So this should be an excellent year for this matchup. I'm excited to be at it on Saturday inside Fiserv Forum. If you are seeking tickets to this game, you should do so on TickPick, the only place where you can buy tickets without ever paying service fees. And of course, if you want $10 off your first purchase to get to this game on Saturday, you can click my link in the podcast description, get $10 off your first order on TickPick, and never pay service or delivery fees on tickets ever again. Like I said, we have an excellent guest here to break down Wisconsin Marquette this week. It is Jack Goods. He's not our returning guest to this show, but has appeared, some of you might know, over on Snap the Pigskin, the NFL show I do weekly with Noah Clark. Jack Goods, formerly of the Buffalo News, currently a Marquette alum and season ticket holder. Really excited to have him along and talking ball because this is a huge opportunity for both teams to get a quad 1 victory on their NCAA tournament resume, on their team sheet. So without further ado, we welcome in Jack Goods to the Sconnie Six Pack. Now we welcome into the show Jack Goods. Jack, thank you very much for joining. I'm really excited to talk ball with you on the show here.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most interesting the Wisconsin Marquette matchup has been in a few years. I mean, we don't get 2 undefeateds like we thought we might get, but it's still, I think, one of the higher ranked matchups we've seen in a long time.
So this was what I led the show with before I popped you in here, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's at least the biggest game since 2011. because that was the last time both of these teams were ranked in this matchup. But there just isn't a lot of history of both of these teams being good at the same time. It's mostly these recent years under Guard and Smart where things have, like, Marquette has finally gotten back up to what it was after Wisconsin's been this, somewhat model of consistency for 25 years. Throw out a year or two in there. But like then before that, you have the 70s where Marquette just dominated this matchup, right? And dominated the landscape of college basketball to a certain extent. So this is a lot of fun. Maybe the biggest game ever in the matchup when all is said and done. Always feels hard to say that about a game in December, though,
Yeah. And we'll see if this one has like an iconic double bird photo like the Al McGuire era did. So,
exactly. Yeah, we'll see. Neither team I feel like took bad loss earlier this week, though. That Michigan team is good. And I tried saying it on the show earlier this week. The Iowa State team is obviously good. Maybe the second best resume in the country, only second best because it lost to the team that maybe has the best resume in the country in Auburn. Should be really fun. Which means that like this is a game with NCAA tournament stakes to some extent. Teams putting resumes together. Wisconsin is trying to win this game to put something on its resume to get back here to play at Fiserv in March.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, where does a Marquette, just before we get into the matchup of it all, like where does Marquette want to go for a first round site if they can be one of these top 4 protected seeds? Is it Cleveland? Because we're talking Cleveland, we're talking Wichita for close places. I think it's probably Cleveland.
Probably Cleveland. Yeah, I haven't thought that far ahead about where they want to go. It was more obvious last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably right. It's like obviously that they're not allowed to play in Fiserv.
Yeah, which is why Villanova played all these games away from Philly.
I remember that
a year or two ago.
Yeah, I think you need to play less than 50% of your home games there. And for Marquette, it's everything but the one student-only game at the Al.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly Marquette's going to be in a position to be thinking about that when we get to tournament time. It's part of the reason why this matchup is important for Marquette when you consider the way the Big East has gone so far when it comes to building resumes. There are not as many opportunities to get big wins in the league as I think that Shaka Smart and Marquette thought there might be coming into the season. They've scheduled in a way that makes up for that. You play one of the tougher non-conference slates that you're going to see, and to get some of the wins they've gotten already at Purdue has got to be one of the best wins
huge
in the country. I think at this point, it's certainly the best win. Well, and maybe until Creighton last night.
Yeah.
Last night it was I believe the top ranked win on the Maryland victory. I mean, they've been in a pretty good spot. And like you said, I don't think either of these teams' losses are detrimental to their resumes. So
yeah,
and this is a win that for either team, it's going to be on the graphic when they are talking about how their resumes stack up at the end of the year.
Absolutely. Got to throw a token appreciation nod to DePaul there. That was undefeated until Wednesday night.
They put up a fight. They put up a fight against Texas Tech. They did.
They did.
I think DePaul might finish 7th in the league, and that says that. I mean, that for DePaul, that's a lot. Holtman's the best coach they've had in my experience watching them. Like, I feel like they're moving in the right direction.
Probably. All right. I think that's enough DePaul talk for so Marquette is coming into a little bit of a transition year, right? And in my opinion, I think Marquette was ranked so highly to start the year. Not that they haven't proven it a little bit. Obviously, that big win over Purdue does a lot of work for you in the prove it department. You got a win over Maryland, a Maryland team that just looks really good, team that just dismantled Ohio State on Wednesday night too. But I think Purdue got a little bit of the benefit of the doubt with how much Shaka has put into this team over the last couple of years, considering they're replacing both an NBA caliber point guard and in Tyler Kolek and an NBA caliber center in Oso Ighodaro. Like the two heart and soul positions of your lineup are both off to the NBA, and Shaka's putting it together. How has he transformed this roster, flipped this roster at those two positions in particular to put this team back up to where it wants to be and potentially being a contender to make the second weekend in March?
Yeah, it's an interesting year because I wouldn't say necessarily that they had to redefine themselves, but they certainly had to redefine the weights that certain players had to
Mm,
carry and the type of roles that players had to play. I mean, you have a player like Kolek obviously runs the whole show in a way that is, I think, very rarely matched at the college level. And Oso plays in a style that is really hard to replicate and allowed Marquette to do things that a traditional big man wouldn't be able to do.
mhm.
Uh, a lot of the ranking and a lot of the reason they've done so well early on has been tremendous faith in Cam Jones. I think everyone knew coming into the year that he would be one of the better players in the country, but there was some question about whether or not he'd be able to fill into that traditional point guard role. And we
Mhm.
saw that a bit at the end of last season when Tyler Kolek was injured.
Mhm.
And we're seeing it further now. I think that he has a passing ability that was underrated and not really because he didn't have to. And he's talked about this. Like
Right.
when you have Tyler Kolek, you don't necessarily have to do it. And they have those guys who are able to step up into bigger roles. I mean, we've seen games like David Joplin will always have a little bit of streakiness, but we've seen games where he has been completely on fire. The Georgia game of the Bahamas, the second half of their game against George Mason has been great. And you've seen a defensive intensity for the team as a whole. He's one of the players that's improved greatly. I think the Purdue win was, I think, the best defensive performance I've seen in the Shaka Smart era. You've seen
Yeah.
them really find the guys who are able to step up, and the freshmen have been good. I mean, it's just a very well-balanced team that has allowed them to make that transition in a way that I think it would have been fair to wonder. I wondered coming into this year if they were really going to be able to live up to that expectation. And I think we've seen now that they can.
Yeah, it looks like this team is what folks expected to a certain extent. At the very minimum, something that should be a top 25 team, a team that'll make the NCAA tournament. I don't think that's in doubt anymore. Um, you mentioned Cam Jones, who is going to be a huge part of this game, and this is Cam Jones and John Tonje. Is like the premier matchup in this game. All of a sudden, two like sneaky national player of the year contenders, perhaps even. Um, it's John Tonje is now down at 10th in the Ken Pom Player of the Year standings, while Cam Jones is up at third. So like this isn't based off of nothing. This is really good.
Yeah.
Cam Jones, I believe, is second in the Big Ten in points per game as we're recording this on Thursday evening. Obviously, that could change between now and Saturday. It's a shame that this game is on I know it's like always on this day, but it's a shame that it's on the afternoon of football conference championship Saturday because this has real national juice.
Yeah.
Could be a lot of fun. What is you touched on Cam Jones a little bit, but what role do you expect to see him play in this matchup against Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you talk about just the National Player of the Year matchup too. It's like it's two in a row now for Cam going up
Yeah,
against Iowa State too. Is another similar
yeah,
sort of thing. The nice thing with Cam is he kind of can do what you need him to do now. There are times where he can really be a lethal offensive killer if that's what you need. And there are some plays around the basket. And Purdue, there were a couple where you just like your jaws on the floor. You're amazed that he can do that.
mm-hmm.
We knew coming into the season that he was capable of that. You know, he was the outside shooter. He was a scorer. And you heard Matt Painter talk about this post game when he talked about Cam. It's like, that was what he was when he got here, but that's not the player that he is now. He's just a much more all-around player. He's passing at a level that, like I said, he hasn't had to do before, so people just weren't sure he was able to. He is a really all-around – he makes them go in a way that just wasn't what he was when he got here. It's a really impressive showing from what Chaka and the staff can do. And that's really been a consistent thing for them. It's like players, when they graduate from Marquette, they're a much better player than when they got there.
Mm-hmm.
And Cam's kind of the latest example of that. None of these guys who've been drafted, when we talk about Kolek and Oso, we talk about Omax, when they got to Marquette, none of those guys were seen as surefire NBA picks, and they all got there. And Cam seems to be the latest guy in that lineage.
I was worried coming into this season that they were going to rely on Cam Jones to do too much. Like, can he still be the guy who provides that same scoring punch while also being a facilitator, while making sure that he doesn't turn the ball over too often, while also staying up and being able to defend, also not using so much energy that his 3-point shooting percentage goes down. Like, none of those things have happened. He is still good at all of those things, and it is wildly impressive to me. Is there a point at which you worry that the staff is going to rely on him for too much down the stretch of a very long college basketball season, or does this feel sustainable to you?
I think it feels more sustainable to me than I thought it would coming into the year, because guys have started to step up. I mean, you've seen you've seen offensive production from Stevie Mitchell, we haven't talked about yet, who I would certainly say is one of the best defensive guards in the country. Should be considered for the Big East Defensive Player of the Year, but with Kalkbrenner there is probably not going to be, just given the counting stats. He's put in offensive performances that you wouldn't expect. 21-point games. Yeah. That's just like, that was not what you saw from him before. You've seen the freshmen, both of them, be able to play. I think that like Damaris Owens had a wonderful game shooting from 3 against Iowa State. You saw 17 from Royce Parham. Like, you've seen guys take on those roles at a level that allows Cam to be able to step back a little bit more. You've seen games where Ben Gold has shot better from 3 than others. You've seen Ross be able to, like the Purdue game, Ross was tremendous on the defensive end. I was just so impressed with him there. The question is whether he's going to play in this game. It looks like he's doubtful at this point, which is a big factor here. But they just have guys who are able to step into that role, so it makes it so it's not as maybe a lopsided team as you probably thought on paper coming into the year.
Yeah, that player doubtful Chase Ross on the wing for Marquette. Obviously not what you want going into a matchup against the John matchup of John Sanjay, John Blackwell for the Golden Eagles. But let's get into what I think is the rub of the matchup overall, which is Marquette's ability to defend the interior, because this is where I've had questions about them all season. And you and I saw it quite a bit in that game against Central Michigan. Jack and I attended that game at Pfizer a few weeks back, where Marquette was on the ropes with the Chippewas for a little bit there. And they kind of had the same problem a little bit against Iowa State at times. What is Marquette's plan overall to guard the interior? Because in my opinion, this is where I think Wisconsin has the biggest advantage in this matchup.
Yeah, there's certainly a bit of movement to be able to overcome the fact that they don't have as much size as other teams might have. And if you look at the roster, Ben Gold is really the only true center. And they're dealing with, you can throw Caden Hamilton in there as a redshirt freshman. Obviously, that's a lot to ask of a young player. He's been really solid, and he's a big guy. Like, he's that, Iowa State learned that the hard way last night when a pick play was not called out correctly, and pay the price.
And he got whacked. Yeah.
I think Parham has you watch him, and I really watched him closely in the George Mason game, because that was a team that definitely outsized them, and he was able to stay with and defend bigger players than what he is. But it definitely will take some movement and will take some creativity when Marquette does face much larger opponents, because they can't be in a situation where Ben Gold is in tremendous foul trouble. They just really don't have the bodies to make up for that.
Yeah, this is where I got some consternation last night after I said that Wisconsin has an advantage on the interior, at least on offense from the Wisconsin perspective over Marquette, because people are still scarred from 2 nights ago against Michigan, where Michigan blocked 11 shots in that game, and it looked gross. Michigan was getting whatever they wanted in the pick and roll, but doing so with 2 7-footers in the lineup with Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. That's not the personnel that Marquette has in this matchup. And while Marquette, if we want to switch to the other side of the floor for a second, Marquette gets its offense in very different ways. This is a team that almost exclusively takes shots at the rim and takes threes, and it's impressive. But Marquette gets there more with straight line drives, timely cuts. They don't really have a player who can play down in the post, who's going to get you on the pick and roll at least as much. They're obviously doing some of that, right? Especially with Cam. But in that sense, if there are two bigs down low for Marquette, what is your level of confidence for them to be able to get their offense going and not just settle for mid-range twos? Because that was their problem against Iowa State the other night. Marquette was 10 of 19 on shots at the rim in that game, according to Bart Torvik, but they also took 20 shots from the mid-range, which they made 6. And like Marquette doesn't take that many shots from the mid-range. They shot against Maryland. They took 28 of their twos from at the rim and only 7 in the mid-range.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very clear strategy with the Nevada Smith plan, one of Marquette's assistants, who is very analytically based, and it's those threes and in the paint. I mean, he follows the math, and that's where they want to be. I have confidence in them offensively. Being able to fit into that plan, because they also just stick to it usually. I mean, Iowa State, I think that's one of the better defenses they're gonna play this year.
Absolutely, and a better defense than Wisconsin's.
Yeah, so usually they are pretty consistent, even if there are times where the shots aren't falling and they still stick to it. Like they're pretty consistent about staying there. When you talk defensively, they have a plan that does also mitigate these interior issues too, where they are about clogging up the lanes, about being really active. If you watch any Marquette broadcast, they will talk about how Shaka told them the goal is 32 deflections in a game. Like that is a priority for this program. And that, like I'll go back to the Purdue game. Like you saw that with guys like David Joplin, with guys like Chase Ross, where they were just everywhere. I mean, they were exactly where Purdue wanted to pass the ball. And when they are really clicking, that's what they're doing. They're active in a way that makes up for the fact that if you just body them straight up, they might be at a disadvantage.
That dynamic between how much emphasis Marquette puts on getting deflections and how they clog up the lane against Steven Crowell down low for Wisconsin, which if you take Steven Crowell and put his assist rate directly into Marquette's lineup, the only player with a higher assist rate is Cam Jones. And it's because Wisconsin doesn't have a true starting point guard in its lineup. Greg Gard has talked this season about how Steven Crowell and his passing ability has made it so that they can invert their offense and they can do some of this pick and pop stuff that frankly Iowa State got away with a little bit against Marquette, but it's something that is going to be a fascinating push-pull in this game to see who gets away with what they want to do there. And if Wisconsin can knock threes down, because they didn't against Michigan at all. And that kind of doomed them. It was not good.
And that was part of the reason that the Marquette game that you mentioned against Central Michigan was as close as it was, is the shots weren't falling. Like they were doing their plan, and their defense was good enough to make up for it. I mean, that's what kept them in it, is that they didn't let the offensive struggles impact them on the defensive end. That will be able to fly against the Central Michigan. If they can't hit their shots against Wisconsin, I can't imagine it going as smoothly.
Yeah. That game was also weird with 40 called fouls, right? Like and Central Michigan shot 6 of 25 from 3 in that game. And like, if you insert a better 3-point shooting team, like into that same game, like a Wisconsin, right? And both of these Wisconsin and Marquette teams shoot the ball not at an elite level by any means, but are both around. It's like 34.2 for Marquette and 34.3% for Wisconsin. They're good shooting. And I think it's whether Wisconsin can force Marquette to take shots in the mid-range, which Wisconsin is really good at this year. Opponents are taking more mid-range twos than twos at the rim against Wisconsin. So whoever comes out in this, where Marquette is really good at not taking the mid-range, but they did have to do a lot of that against Iowa State, it's a fascinating push pull of who's going to win out there, because I think if Wisconsin can make Marquette shoot in the mid range, given their equal affinity for shooting at the three, I think Wisconsin pulls away in this one if they can just make Marquette one dimensional. Yeah. If we are talking X factor players for Marquette and Wisconsin, who do you think is the X factor for Marquette in this game? Who needs to show up big?
Well,
or even in a key moment. Obviously, we could say Cam Jones needs to show up.
Yeah, like Cam's like the
somebody maybe we haven't mentioned.
but I think with Cam, it's just so consistent. Like I came into this year feeling like I was pretty confident. I knew what Cam was going to be, and I thought that there were three players that would determine success of Marquette's season, and it was David Joplin, Chase Ross, and Ben Gold were the three that were there was more variance. If Ben Gold hits his threes, they're a different team, and he's shown he has the ability to do that. To add that stretch factor is huge for them when you consider that lack of size, and he can do it. It's just a matter about finding that consistency. So I would lean towards him or David Joplin. When Joplin is really hitting from three, I mean, they're really hard to stop. I mean, you saw that with Georgia. They were down at half in the George Mason game until Joplin really put the team on his back in the second half. If those guys can hit from deep, that avoids that problem you've talked about having to settle from mid-range. So I would point to those two as really the keys for Marquette.
Yeah, that sounds right for me. To me, I should say. For Wisconsin, it's got to be Max Klesmit needing to figure it out. Oh man. He's a 35.8% shooter from three for his career, but he's 16 of 63 on the season. Just disgusting. He was 1 of 9 against Michigan and kind of sunk them late in the game, with Wisconsin choosing to go to him, even though he hasn't been on. Meanwhile, John Tonje is shooting just above 44% from three this season.
If previous Marquette Wisconsin games are anything to go by, one player on Wisconsin will randomly get enormously hot from 3-point range. I believe Hepburn was the best showing he had all season 2 years ago. Last year it was Klesmit, wasn't it?
That sounds right. Yeah, I think it was. Let's see. While we're doing this on live radio here, that is not so live, but we can do it. Marquette, Wisconsin, 2024. Max Klesmit had 21 and shot 5 of 10 from three. So
usually one Badger ends up just going off.
He was the only Badger to make a 3-pointer in that game. Wisconsin was 5 of 20 in that game, which means Max Klesmit was 5 of 10. Everyone else was 0 of 10 combined.
Yeah, it is bizarre how that seems to work out. And yeah, I'm almost certain the year before it was the best 3-point shooting outing of the year for Hepburn. So
yeah, that's probably about right. I'm looking at the wrong game here. Oh no, I'm all over.
But this is the one, like, Shaka has revolutionized this Marquette program. I mean, you see alumni interest and just fan engagement at an all-time high. It's a program that aligns with what the university really values and the type of character and mindset that its fans have. This is the last piece that they have not beaten Wisconsin under Shaka yet. This is like, obviously, you want to get to a Final Four or an Elite Eight. Like, those are obviously future goals. But
Marquette fans really care about this matchup.
And Wisconsin fans love to pretend like they don't.
It's like kind of true.
I think it's definitely. Can we just admit that it's like a fun rivalry? Like, I don't understand.
It is. So the more I have done this work, the more I have come to appreciate it. And the Wisconsin alums do care about this way more than casual sidewalk fans do. Because I know you didn't grow up in Wisconsin, but there are so many people who are like, oh yeah, I'll cheer for Wisconsin when they play in the tournament on Thursday. And then I'll cheer for Marquette when they play in the tournament on Friday. Like, people who are not alums of the university don't really care one way or the other. but it's, I certainly like to get one up on the, I don't know, 2 people I know who, well, I guess I know more people than 2 who have gone to Marquette now that I know you and others. But yeah, like the alums care. I don't know that casuals do. Not to besmirch casuals, but like you're a big state school, you're going to have a lot of casuals.
Yeah, I mean it's the difference between a Wisconsin and Marquette. It's like exactly. If you root for Marquette, you probably have a tie to the university. You probably went there, or you got a family member go there. If you go to Wisconsin, you might just live in the state. Like it's just the nature of state schools and how that works. So it's an interesting dynamic. But I think it's a really, like, from the Marquette side, it's a game I love to have because there aren't necessarily as many traditional rivals for us as there maybe are for other schools, because a lot of the rivals aren't in the conference anymore.
Yeah, here in the conference abyss for however many decades.
Yeah, I mean they were without a conference for so long. Obviously, like there's a theoretical rivalry with DePaul, but it's been one-sided enough that that's not exactly heated. And a lot of the other big rivalries were from before I was a student. I came here in 2013-14, so at the end of the previous Big East. You don't have the Syracuses and the Notre Dames like you used to. So, there have been new rivalries. There's definitely something heated between us and Seton Hall over the last few years, and UConn competing for the Big East title. But there's something about the Wisconsin Marquette rivalry because there is that familiarity. It's why I've been frustrated with some of the conference realignment, because I think the heart of college sports is geography and familiarity, knowing someone across the office who went to the other school.
Yeah, you are speaking my language 100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but we don't have time for my hour-long rant on that. I've done that on the show already. Oh my gosh. All right. Let's try to wrap this with a little Marquette wins if what happens, Wisconsin wins if what happens. I will go first here. I've obviously tipped my hand a little bit on this. It's the interior play goes Wisconsin's direction. That Wisconsin, who has a couple of guys who can post up and hit buckets, particularly Stephen Crowell, can get in there. And look, Wisconsin, its worst 3-point shooting percentage of the season against Michigan. They shot 22.2% from 3. But Wisconsin has found its way out of poor shooting performances in other games. They beat Pitt to win the Greenbrier while shooting 5 of 20 from 3. It's just that Michigan had the ability to take away Wisconsin's post scoring, their interior scoring, and other teams haven't. I think that's kind of the recipe for this game for Wisconsin against Marquette, is if you can get both sides going a little bit, I think you're in a much better spot, particularly given the fact that I think Wisconsin has the ability to limit Marquette's bread and butter of taking darn near half of their shots at the rim. It's going to be hard because Marquette's a much quicker team than Wisconsin is in transition, and a quicker team like Michigan in transition just killed Wisconsin the other night. But if Wisconsin can figure that crap out, I think that's where they walk out of Fiserv with a win. A building I expect to be rocking on Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun being there.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the fan dynamic is on Marquette versus Wisconsin, because tickets did not open up to the general public for this game. They were gone after season ticket holders. Then there's a season ticket holder referral section. So it never actually opened to just Badgers fans being able to buy them straight up.
Yeah, the resale.
I'm sure there's money on secondary.
Yeah,
but
also it feels like there's less juice in this after both teams lost this week, sadly.
I feel like most people bought their tickets already, and it's still,
you never know.
It's 2 1-loss teams that are in a pretty good spot. I mean, you're talking about impressive groups. So from the Marquette perspective, I think that if they win, it starts on the defensive end, and it starts with just really being able to, like I said, clog up those lanes and make up for perhaps the lack of Chase Ross in this game. They've shown that if they can do that, they can score enough to make a recipe that works for them to win. So they're going to need to make sure that the ball doesn't just end up one-on-one in the paint. That's where they definitely are at a spot where they could end up in trouble. It really comes down to not letting you get to that point. And there were a lot of times in that Purdue game where, I mean, they didn't really even get the opportunity to throw the ball around the perimeter. I mean, it was gone when they're up top. And if they can keep that up, they're in a really good spot. And I also think, the fan base and just what the Pfizer atmosphere is like is important too, because I do think that we've seen that Wisconsin has done better at Pfizer than Marquette has done at the Kohl Center. So is there a make sure? Yeah, I think it is an underrated home court advantage when you look at it, especially under Shaka. Like I think that they've lost, I want to say it's 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, it's a really small number.
Since Shaka has taken over, I think it's an underrated atmosphere in that way. You've seen that happen to Purdue, to Texas, to Baylor. Really good programs. It's a bit different when it's Wisconsin and the fans can travel a little easier, but I still think there is some dynamic there.
In the last 2 seasons, Marquette has lost a combined 3 games at home. One of them to UConn last year, and the other before that overtime game against Wisconsin the year prior, where Chucky Hepburn went 5 of 6 from 3 after checking out and back in of that game with an injury. So that's this rivalry kind of summed up over the last few years.
It's really, it is interesting because, and I think you've seen too, like Marquette has been in a better position at the tournament than Wisconsin has. And it's just, this game it's never a blemish. It's never really Wisconsin's always been good enough that it hasn't hurt them. But there are a lot of Marquette grads who would certainly like to walk away. Saturday happy.
Yeah, it helps having 2 coaches in this matchup who are both from the state originally, right? There's no risk of this matchup going away while both of them are there, and I think both athletic departments probably take a lot of pride in making sure that this matchup happens every year.
Great article in the Journal Sentinel about that, actually, about ensuring that this matchup.
I did see that. Yeah, after the one time they didn't play back, however when. Yeah. Yes, a very great piece. Jack, would you have anything you would like to plug to the people? Anything you'd like to say about yourself, or last remarks on the Golden Eagles and the one-sided rivalry here before we go?
One-sided only recently. I believe in the all-time series, Marquette is still leading.
Probably.
If anyone wants to follow me, I do tweet updates about Marquette. You'll have to understand it comes with a tinge of bias. Now, being an alum, working there and also in grad school there, my fun little project this year has been I've been collecting Marquette basketball cards, and I've been tweeting out a new one every game day. So I got to think of a good one that fits with the Wisconsin theme. I'm thinking about going Wesley Matthews, given his family history with Wisconsin. Yeah. But I think I did William Gates of Hoop Dreams fame last game. I did Daryl Morcell for the Maryland game. I try to find some tie with all of them. And in the new world of NIL, we'll have a lot more cards going forward. So that's my that's my frequent Marquette project this year.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you so much, Josh. Josh. Oh my God, I'm dying.
We know each other too well for that.
Oh, why did I call you Josh? Who was I talking to the other day? Whose name is Josh? I don't know. Just horrible. Sorry, Jack.
You got it right on the Chiron, at least. So
I know. I don't know why. Oh man, brutal. All right. All right. I'll see you on Saturday.
That sounds good.
Oh, thank you to Jack, not Josh Goods, for jumping on the show. Genuinely don't know. I knew Jack in real life before. I knew him in internet sports life. So very, very strange for me to genuinely call him the wrong name. That is embarrassing. Hope you enjoyed the preview. Hope you enjoy this should be banger of game. Saturday morning, Saturday early afternoon. Should be an absolute treat. If you are looking for more Wisconsin Badgers football news, link to the podcast description will be all of my latest pieces for Athlon Sports. I'll include a separate link directly to our transfer portal tracker that you can take a gander at for the latest transfer news for the Wisconsin Badgers. As I am recording this, we have had 13 players enter the transfer portal, if I am doing that off the top of my head correctly. So plenty of news to go around. I'm sure there'll be more by the time this comes out as well. But that transfer portal tracker document is updated constantly by myself and my colleagues over at Athlon Sports for the Wisconsin Badgers. Thank you for listening to today's Sconnie Six Pack podcast. We will be back by the end of the weekend. I don't think I'm going to be doing an instant reaction show to this matchup. Hopefully I can get one in there. But I have to go from that game at Pfizer to a holiday party. One that which Jack will actually be at. So I'll be doing that and trying to enjoy my life. So we'll be doing that. So we'll try to get a show out to you on Monday. Until we talk to you all again very soon. Thank you for listening to the Sconnie Six Pack podcast. I've been your host, Kedrick Stumbris. I cover the Wisconsin Badgers for Athlon Sports. You can follow me on the website formerly known as Twitter at Kedrick Stumbris and follow Jack Goods at Goods on Sports. Also, thank you for listening to the podcast. Follow the podcast on your podcast platform of choice or on YouTube, youtube.com/@Sconnie6Pack. While you're there, smash the subscribe button, hit that like button. Let me know down in the comments who you think is going to win this Big Ten, Big East matchup between Wisconsin and the Marquette Golden Eagles. Until we talk to you all again very soon on Wisconsin.